So how's it going, my comic channel? I mean, we're here today with Mike W. Belcher, the creator of The Man in the Mask. How you doing, Mike?
Doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing good. So, how long have you been making comics for?
Actually, this year will be 10 years since I actually committed to doing it. I'd always wanted to do it all my life. But, you get to an age where you start looking at, well, it's time to start being a grown up. And even though I never quit, reading comics, there was a point where I kind of set the idea of drawing comics or creating comics to the side. And, got married, had a kid, life kept on going, but it was something that always was in the back of my head. It's like that was unfulfilled. I just need to do it. And I had a story, and it was something that was that was the other part of it. Not only did I still want to do it, but I had a story to tell. And so while I worked along, years went by. I'd scribble stuff down. I'd do things, and then finally, it's kind of an interesting story. My son, comics were always sitting around, but I never, like here, you got to read comics. You got to be a comic fan. It was kind of something he just kind of organically picked up. And he got to an age where he kind of wondered, I mean, Dad, you got the art table in there, you got all these sketches. How come you never done a comic? And so I was very honest with him. He was 12 years old. And I said, well, life gets in the way. And, sometimes you just never get to do what you want to do. And he said, well, if I helped you, would you do it? And so, like I said, 10 years ago, in 2014, between him doing that and, I think cons really started getting going around that time. There was a lot more plentiful, a lot more access I had here in Kentucky. It was the combination of the two. So I kind of just, finally just put my nose down and said, I want to, not only am I going to get into comics, I'm going to finally do my story. And again, my son helped me out. I taught him how to color because, he really couldn't do anything else with it because it was for me. But it took me about 2 years, about 2.5, 3 years to do a graphic novel, my very first graphic novel. And I did a beginning and an end. I did it. It was the first Man in the Mask story, and I kind of thought, well, I wanted a whole book just in case I never got a chance to do it again, or for some reason I just decided not to do it. And so it had an ending, but it was an open beginning. How about that? It could be read as an ending, but you could also pick it up. And by the time I kind of got there, I didn't want to stop. And so, I got to cranking out maybe a book or two a year. Sold them at cons, and basically that's it. I've been doing it ever since. Like I said, this is the, what I call the 10th year anniversary of me finally getting my button gear and doing what I wanted to do.
You got to do like a gold banner on some of your books that you put out this year.
Actually, I haven't done that, but I thought about doing some kind of anniversary. But the idea of just getting some more books out this year has kind of been my more focus because, again, I've been able maybe to get one book out a year, and so far I've gotten two, and I'm almost ready with the third one. And so for me, that really is kind of an anniversary, being able to to get that many books out. I'm hoping another two before December, and for myself, that's a way big record for me. So it really is a good celebration of kind of where I started to where I'm at right now. And like I said, I'm proud of where Man in the Mask has got to. I've got it's a small readership, but they care. And a year ago, I started a newsletter on Substack that kind of supplemented, helping to kind of get the message out. And I tried to make it kind of a fictional newspaper that reported from where my character, worked, and trying to make it a little fun. And I've gotten a pretty good subscriber base off of it. So I get a lot of, good. I don't get as much feedback as I'd like to, but I get more subscribers. So obviously something's working. So I've been lucky with that.
So does your son still help you today with your comics?
He does. He does his own comics now because he's 23, 24 next month, and he does his own books when he can, because it's the same situation. Because that's one thing I do push. I said, don't do like I did and wait till you were 42 years old to do it. Just, if this is what you want to do, you find the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's doing a Halloween story for my next book. So he's going to contribute for the first time. I've let him draw a Man in the Mask story because I really kind of I've relegated him to being the colorist, but this time that's something I haven't announced yet. But he's and a good thing about the cons, people know him just as well as they know me. He's right next to me at the con, so we're a team. So people know of him, to say the least.
That's so kick-ass that it's like the father-son duo,
Yeah, and especially since that's kind of the gist of what Man in the Mask is. Man in the Mask is when I was coming up with the story, I wanted it to be everything I liked about comics, but I kind of padded it with the idea of the relationship I had with my grandfather. My grandfather was a person that always encouraged me. When people around me were telling me, oh, grow up, you're never going to make any money doing funny books. You're not going to do this. It's just, you're wasting your time. He always told me, no, you sit there and you do it and you don't listen to anybody. And so when I was coming up with the story, it just seemed to me like, because basically the mission statement of the book is, just imagine carrying on the family business, but what if the family business is wearing a mask and watching over your hometown? And that's the whole point of it, is the idea that this guy, his grandfather asked him to carry on for him, to carry on, basically just looking over the town, just making sure it stayed okay, and then how he reacts to it as he gets older. Having some fun with it. A lot of the comics that I grew up with and the comics of the golden age that I enjoyed, superheroes enjoyed being superheroes. Guys in masks, it was not a burden to them. And a lot of comics today, that's what it is. They're a burden. They spend half their time, their page count. Oh, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't think I can. It's like, I grew up in an age, Christopher Reeve. You put on that cape and you hit that playground and you had fun with it because it looked fun. And that's the kind of comic that I wanted to do, because, when you get to do your own comic, you're the boss. No editor is going to tell me what kind of comic I'm going to make. And, the other byline of Man in the Mask is it's fun to be the good guy. Because why can't it be? Why shouldn't it be?
So do you have like old campy colorful villains?
No, that's the thing about it is, just because that's, I set out to do a couple different things with it. I wanted it to be fun, but I also wanted it to be, the reason it's called Man in the Mask is it's about this guy. And while he doesn't live in a real world, he doesn't live, also in a very too surreal world where there's colorful, campy villains. The idea I wanted to do with Man in the Mask was that this guy was pretty together. There's no tragedy. There's nothing that motivates him. And so the idea behind him is that he honestly just wants to help. And it doesn't always mean punching a guy. It could also mean, helping out a neighbor, or watching over his neighborhood, making sure, things don't happen. People don't break into the people's houses. But the idea, occasionally I can do that kind of story. That a villain can pop in, and it can be of any type of story. I mean, I've done 4 regular issues. The first one was, basically a get to know you book, so to speak. The second issue was he was barely in it. That he was basically in the background watching over a girl trying to find her missing father. And then the third issue is a time travel story. And then, the fourth issue is the villain of the week kind of story, because I wanted to establish anything is possible with this book. I'm not, don't limit me by, the idea that this is a street level guy. This isn't Gotham, but it also isn't New York. There's a good in between where, as long as you keep up the belief to your readers that anything can happen, they're not going to say, "Hey, wait a minute, that's not that doesn't look right. It doesn't seem like that would happen in that world." And so I wanted to establish all these kind of points. It's like, hey, I can take the story anywhere I want to, just because, like I said, he looks very street level. Don't put me in the hole there. So, like I said, there's villains, but I like to think it's a little more personal story.
Okay.
What is this guy's life?
Where can people pick your book up at?
I've got two places: Indyplanet, that I print with Kablam, and that's their, the fulfillment. You can
Mm,
go to indyplanet.com/, I think it's AMK hyphen comics. I think that's one place. I've got an online store, amkcomics.bigcartel.com. You get them from me, you get them signed, and I usually throw in a little goodie. I always try to make sure that they have a fun time with reading the books, but then they also realize that I appreciate how much they, because type thing, times are tough. Comics are a luxury, and I certainly appreciate anybody who gives me anything to share my stories. I mean, I do my stories for me, and sharing it is just the added pleasure. If anybody enjoys what I do, and luckily, again, I've had a lot of people enjoy it, and that, again, that definitely means a lot to me. I certainly appreciate it.
what Comic Cons do you have planned this year?
I don't have many. Most of the cons that I can have access to, as far I usually, if it's a 2 hour drive, I usually can do that 2 or 3 hour drive, because it just with my work and family, it's kind of hard to get out there. So I try to do a lot of social media, because it's just harder for me to get to cons. And unfortunately, even smaller cons are starting to really get out of the price range. I mean, it's getting ridiculous. Local show here, for 1 day con, it's over $200 for a table, and I as much as I might be able to sell, I can't cover that, and I'm gonna be, and it's realistic to say that. I try to be very transparent. I mean, it's, I like to do a lot more cons than I do, but sometimes access isn't easy, and the other cons in the area are not very comic based. They're there for people are spending their money on signatures and pictures with B-list celebrities, or or bigger comic names than me. And so, again, it's I try to be very realistic, with my stuff, because I'm very grassroots. I've never crowdfunded a book. I never wanted that to be something that limited me. In fact, that was the only reason I wouldn't do a book, if that was the case. So I always, I produce the book, and I print how many that I can keep on stock, and so I do it that way. And I've been lucky enough to sell what my stock is, and like I said, continue to grow. But and I've considered crowdfunding, if anything, just to give it a try. But yeah, as far as cons go, I used to do 3 or 4 a year, and I've only done two so far this year, and I'm maybe thinking one right now past this time. So I haven't made my mind up yet.
Okay. What advice would you give to new creators out there?
Just do it. I think a lot of people sit on it too long, and that was my problem. This is a first-hand account. You second guess yourself. You don't think you're good enough. You don't think what you're doing is good enough. It won't be attractive. But so help me, actually sitting down and just starting it. That's what feeds it. That's the reason I try to keep myself busy with it, because you just have to keep at it, because you won't get better. Then your stories won't get better. Your art won't get better. Your coloring, your lettering, all that stuff won't get better until you sit down and do it. And so that's anytime anybody's ever asked me that, it's like, well, I can't afford it. Well, it doesn't cost you anything to just sit down and draw. See how much you can just sit down and draw, and then boom, you might be done with it. And then, hey, guess what? There's some places that you can print up one copy. And if you can print up one copy, you might be able to print up 10 copies, and so on and so forth. So really, it's the old Nike thing. Just do it. Don't second guess yourself, because if you keep second guessing yourself, you're going to be 10 years down the road, doing the exact same thing that you're doing. I can't do it. I'm not good enough. That's the way that, like I said, first-hand account. I had talking experience here because it's one of those things where I don't regret it that I didn't start earlier because again, I think the biggest gift is being able to have done it with my son so far. So I couldn't have done that if I did it earlier, and so that's the way I look at it. Yeah, I could have done it earlier, and yeah, of course I wish I did it earlier, but I did it for a reason. It happened for a reason. Everything washed out the way it did, and so, but for anybody starting it, they're sitting there looking at an idea and wishing, oh, I'm so jealous of that guy behind the table. I wish I want to do a comic so bad, but really, it just boils down to it because it doesn't cost anything to be creative. It really, that's down the road. You can figure that out afterwards. You can figure out how, like I said, with crowdfunding and or you're just yourself, invest in yourself or family if you want to go that far because no one says you have to go that far because sometimes being creative is its own reward. So that's the way I look at it.
So, dead or alive, who would you like to make a comic book with? Your dream team.
Oh my gosh! I mean that right there is, you're looking at Denny O'Neil, Jim Aparo. I mean, those are the ones that, as far as dead, that I would never have a chance with. Um, uh, alive, I don't know because there's so many again. There's just I look at it, and then I started thinking when I think, well, I like them, but will I like them when I'm done? Because when you're a lone warrior, a self-publisher like me, you kind of get used to not compromising with somebody, and so you just kind of wonder. One of these days, I'd love to do a book with Dan Scotty, who did this piece of art. I think Dan, he has no difficulty writing his own stuff or drawing his own stuff, but like I said, I'm friends, and one of these days, I would like to do something with Dan. There's tons of people, and like I said, I letter comics for a bunch of people, and that's a nice little form of collaboration because lettering allows me to be creative, and I could do it really quickly. But I also get to see so much story and so much art before anybody else does. So I've gotten to work with people that I do like and I do admire. So on that aspect, I already do collaboration. As far as, and I can't complain. But yeah, there's people that I would, Denny O'Neil and Jim Aparo, I would love to have lettered a book or seen what they could have done with Man in the Mask. Those are the kind of things. And because when I was younger, working for the big two was an attraction. But once I started seeing I could have made my own stuff. I saw Indy and I never looked back. I mean, books like Nexus by Mike Barron, who I've been lucky enough to get to know, and actually get a backup story for Man in the Mask. I went indie, and I've never looked back. I love indie comics. There's such a wealth of creativity and talent out there, and it's about the only reason I stay with social media, because I think social media is such a toxic, junk. But getting to see everybody show their stuff and all the creativity, it's what keeps me there, and I love it, and I love watching people create things. I'm a sponge when it comes to that, not just my own stuff. I appreciate anybody that can sit down and be creative.
Is there anything you want to say before we go?
No, I just appreciate you having me on. And again, this, right now I'm in the midst of telling a nice little origin mini-series. I'm retelling my graphic novel right now. My graphic novel was, the story I was extremely happy with, but I wasn't happy with the artwork. I had been off drawing for, longer than I want to admit. But I had, it's one of those things, I had the desire to do it once I had a lot of things that plopped in place. Like I said, my son wanted to color it, and, so I kind of jumped into it, not really getting my art chops back where I wanted them to be. It was more of a passion. And that was the thing about the 10th anniversary this year. I made a kind of a point that I wanted to make a comic out of the graphic novel. Most people put the comic together and then collect it for trade. Well, this is kind of, I call it the reverse engineering of it. It's the idea of taking the last 10 years of experience that I've done and I'm retelling the story, but I'm doing it in a sequential way instead of doing it as all in one read. You can read each of the comics individually, just like a good old miniseries. And I'm adding stuff and I'm refining stuff that I had done in the graphic novel. But I just wanted it to feel like a comic miniseries. I wanted it to feel, because again, when I did the original graphic novel, I thought that was going to be my only thing, my one and done. And so again, I just thought that was a good way of commemorating 10 years, was kind of going back to the start and seeing what my current talent level could do with the story. And so I'm about halfway done with it. It's the 6th issue, and I'm almost done with issue 3 to be able to sell it. So it's been very interesting revisiting the story from this eye, this point of view and where I'm at artistically. Been getting some really good compliments on it, because I think a few people thought, well, why are you going back and wasting your time retelling the story? It's like, well, I am retelling it, but I'm not retelling. It's kind of a reimagine. It is the same story, but when you do it issue to issue, you fill out things a little bit more. I ran through a lot of elements of the story in the graphic novel really quickly, and so each of the issues, I'm spending a little bit more time. So I definitely, if somebody might want to check it out, if you like good old fashioned comics, it's all ages. I don't have any language. And any violence that you would have seen in the 80s, any 80s comic, any 90s comic, it's not over the top. It's there to propel the story. But it's the idea of good guys. If you enjoy if you enjoy a story about good guys, give me a shot.
All right. I appreciate you taking the time to come talk with me today, Mike.
Hey, again, appreciate you having me.
What? You mean you haven't subscribed to Comicchatauthority? Oh, come on, subscribe already. What are you waiting for? It's no big deal. Like, man, don't forget to tell him to hit that like button. Yeah, that too. Just subscribe.